Let me begin this conversation with you sharing maybe a question and maybe an experience. How do we learn how to become scientists? And I'm not only speaking about exact sciences, but any science in general. What are the things that we learn from childhood on what a scientist must be? When I started my studies many years ago, I remember very clearly that I had an exam on physics. It was one of those classic exams in which you are supposed to use formulas, in which you are supposed to memorize some of the key concepts about how it works, put them into perspective, use them to solve a problem. I got really nervous, extremely nervous, and I failed. I completely failed that exam. And the thing is, it left me with an everlasting bad experience about what physics was supposed to be. Maybe that's why I went into chemistry instead of physics. On time, I was able to overcome that distaste because I had to come up with physics again at some point. When you try to understand how chemistry actually works, you end up there. And little by little on time, I learned about the good things that it has. But that's an experience that a lot of people don't have. You learn about how difficult science can be. You learn it from exams. You learn it from the results that you get on your grades. And maybe you end up with this bad experience that tells you that you are not fit to do science. And you end up somewhere else. Let me share some statistics about how the Mexican population sees science. These are the results of a survey by 3M on 2018. They said 72% of Mexican population admitted they know very little about science, any science at all. Doesn't matter which. 2 out of 10 admitted they knew absolutely nothing about what science is. 1 in 3 is skeptical about anything that comes up with the name science, with the brand science attached to it. And even more, 54% believe that science is for elitists. It's for people in the highest strata of the society. They do things that we do not understand. There are even some surveys that says that they believe that we should be controlled because we know stuff or things that can harm humanity in some way. Of course, that leaves you the idea that we have a lot to do in terms of what we are supposed to do with the general population. How do we educate people, not only that so they can trust us, but how can they know how it works to make informed decisions? Because in the end, this is the people that make decisions. This is the people that vote. So their opinions matter on democracy, on decision-making processes, etc. So what's the problem? How do we teach science? How do we learn it? We memorize. We start by memorizing phrases, laws, ideas that someone gave 100, 200 years ago even. And most of the time, we don't really understand why it was put that way. What does it actually mean? We just copy and paste in the exam. That's a problem. We learn something that is called scientific method, as if it was an infallible recipe that the scientists use every single day, just by the letter, trying to come up with science. But scientists actually don't use it like that. It's more of a guideline. It's not exactly step by step. And in the end, when we go to the classrooms everywhere around the world, we try to solve problems. Problems that are written in a textbook. Problems that are idealized situations. Things that maybe our students will not find out, and probably will not, in their experience in life when they come up. So we are teaching them to be A graders. They can be perfect grade kids, but that is something that is going to be corrosive on their vocation later on, when they actually encounter real science. Because real science is not done like this. When you do an experiment, you don't know what you're going to find. You don't know how to interpret the results at first. You have ignorance about how it's going because that's what it's supposed to be. It's something new. You have to know little by little. Being wrong is actually good. And we say it all the time about science, that science is something that corrects itself, that allows it to be a little more perfect, a little bit. But it's not perfect, ever. That's the idea. But we have demonized being wrong. And that's an idea that gets inside ourselves from childhood. Because they tell you that you have to be A grader, you have to get straight 10s all the time. If you do that, you're a good student. If you do that, you get to be a scientist, for instance. But as you grow up and you go maybe to graduate school, master's, PhD, and you start engaging in real science, what you find is that you don't know. And it's something that has been discussed a lot. That provokes depression, anxiety, because people start to believe, well, if I don't know the answer, if I don't know how to solve this problem, maybe I'm not fit for science. Maybe I made the wrong call. And a lot of people abandon their studies because of that feeling. On top of that, the people that actually stays on the graduate school, on time, they end up with something that we call the imposter syndrome. They think they ended up there just by some chance, by some maybe miraculous thing that happened at some point, but they don't actually think that they deserve what they have achieved. So we have a lot of things that come up from this idea that science and scientists is about being good all the time. So what can we do about it? What do we propose? Well, we have to learn, yes, about the successes in science, but also, and most importantly, about when it fails. What have the people that is very famous about science have done wrong? Because that takes away that halo of perfection. They are not, like by divine inspiration, being put in that pedestal. That is something that comes up with time, with training, with expertise. That takes years on the making. And even then, if you read the biographies of many of the scientists, they end up sticking to ideas that are not true because they have these cultural notions, because their society imposes that. So they ended up being wrong. As probably the people in the next centuries will think about many of the things that we believe now. So we have to make peace with this idea. We have to learn a little the actual way in which science was developed. And this is my call to you, to use the power of history. The power of history in terms of how things are really done. Even in the 1940s, this was an idea that started to come up. James B. Conant was a very famous chemist. He worked at Manhattan Project. He was president of Harvard University. And he encountered the same problem even then. And he said, there are two possible ways in which we can actually teach science. One of them is the traditional one. You work by repeating ideas and principles. That works if your only aim is to pass an exam. And that works to a certain extent, because you have to only repeat, and use. And on time, your brain discards that idea. Even more, your brain does not learn how to think logically, does not develop critical reasoning. A lot of problems come up from that. Knowledge, ideas, principles always remain alien to the students. It's something that they don't actually understand. What can we do then? He proposed the historical approach. What does it mean by the historical approach? It does not mean memorizing now biographies. That would end up to the exact same result. What he proposed was to recognize how exactly things are done in real life. How can we follow exactly the same train of thought so we can come up with the same ideas? And to do that, we need to know the exact experiments. We know to replicate. We need to do the calculations exactly as they did it, so we can understand how they achieve that knowledge. In that way, it becomes a logical consequence. It's something that you did. And because you did it, that is engraved in your memory long term. And without you even knowing about it, you end up training your brain to think in a different way. That's the hardest problem of them all, because when our students arrive here in our classrooms, they are common students. They don't have the training, the scientific training to think in a different way, and we have to help them to develop this process. So we have to understand that these guys that are in the Olympus of science, they were right about some things, but they were also wrong some other times. It was them, yes, but it was not them alone. They are the product of their societies, the historical moment, the cultural moment that was there. Newton worked in an epidemic. Einstein worked just before World War II. Lavoisier worked at the beginning of the French Revolution. As you may imagine, when society is changing that much, new ideas are easy in the air. You dare to go against established notions. That helps you not to think about your reputation, but to think about in a different way, to come out of the box. It was their moment also, how they lived in. So we have to educate with a solid reason. If I give ideas to my students that are my own, and I don't help them to overcome that distance, I will not be able to help them to reason. Reason is not developed by just accepting uncritically ideas. Reason, as Descartes said many years ago, is something that comes up by testing any idea and only accepting it after your reasoning proves you to be correct. You have to go with critical thinking. You have to go with scientific culture. And scientific culture is not just to memorize random data. It's the different way in which we think. Sometimes our students ask us, how can we solve problems? How do we come up with ideas in the experiments? And it's not because we, the teachers, are superior in any way. It's just because we have experience. We have been doing it for far longer time. That helps our brain to process things differently. And if you want to do the same, you have to go the same path by yourself. We are teachers. We are not just a bureaucratic office. We are here to help. We are here to help you to confront with different ideas. So you can come up with the ideas by yourself. You have to encounter this, and we have to help you, push you one step further, because that's what science is about. Just one step. It's a process that never ends. If you can come up with that, that's good enough. So let me give you an example of how things might seem a little different if we try to give this historical approach. Let's begin with this idea that probably some of your teachers hammer in your heads from when you were very, very young. This idea of the conservation of matter. And they teach it to you as some sentence that says matter is neither created nor destroyed. What does it actually mean? How did that actually came up to be? We have to learn about people that were alchemists. Remember? There are some people that actually still believe that they are alchemists. Well, they thought about how matter was made up. And they thought at some moment that mercury was important. Because mercury, it's a liquid metal. It's the only one. Imagine this mysticism around this substance. So it was probably an element to them. And then in the 16th century, we had this physician, Paracelsus, and he became really famous curing diseases with mercury. So now it becomes a thing, a substance that is readily available for everyone because you use it as medicine. So when Lavoisier comes up in the 18th century and he develops this idea, he works again with mercury because it's something that is readily available, because they know how it works. As it happens, and by chance, he came up with the idea of working with it, a substance that decomposes and remixes again, just by itself. Is one of the few substances that is able to do so. That was luck. But if you add that Lavoisier is the 14th generation of a family of accountants and administrators that works with budgets, that work with tables, who have this idea that nothing can be lost in terms of money, then the idea of the conservation of matter is really simple, because it's something that is even in your familiar DNA, in your mind. So, I know we have a lot of things to do as teachers. We have a lot of grants and administrative things that we have to do. But we also have to remember that we are trying to help generate the new generation of scientists, the new generation of people that is trained to think in a logical manner. We had the experience of COVID, how many people were mistrusting about the ideas of vaccines and medicines because they do not understand how the actual process is being done. So we have to do better. We have to try to come up with stories. That takes time, yes, because we have to learn even more, and we have to find a way to teach it. We have to find a way to share it. We have to tell stories. We have to encourage our students to learn. So we have to be passionate about what we're telling. It's not just reciting some pages. Storytelling is extremely important. You're an actor in front of your classroom. You have to engage. It has to be thrilling. It has to be something that left your students with the idea of, I want to know more. And with that, maybe they can become the protagonist of their own stories. Thank you very much.